Warning! Warning! This podcast contains spoilers.
Listen at your own risk.
Welcome to Minishift. I'm Chris.
And I'm Ev.
This is our first Minishift in a while. First of many as the year begins to wrap up with so many interesting films coming out. And as you can probably tell for this one, we are talking about Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. The supposed end to the Skywalker saga, but not really. Yes, and a lot of pew pew pews as well.
Yes.
So, all right, we might as well get straight into it. This movie, I feel like, in many respects, is going to be one of the most talked about of the year, for better or worse. Also, very exciting as well that Evan and I have not actually talked about the film yet, so we don't actually know what each other think about it.
I mean, I can probably guess, though.
Well, maybe, but we'll see. We'll get into it. All right, so what do you think of The Rise of Skywalker?
My initial thoughts were simply, it's cute. It's kind of fun.
It's cute. It's a $300 million movie. That's cute.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, aside from the last act, it's all like the colors are surprisingly vibrant for a lot of it. Especially, even in like the rebel camp, it's set in the forest and there's all this greenery going on. So it does actually look pretty vibrant. And I mean, that little droid fixer, I keep forgetting his name, but the one that works on...
Babu Frick, I think it is.
Yes.
The guy who just yells, "Ah!"
Yes.
That one.
And
yeah.
I fixed the droid.
Yep, that's right.
Yes.
Yep.
He literally is cute and adorable, and he needs a spin-off movie.
That's true.
Like a Star Wars
Give
story.
him his own Disney Plus TV series.
Yes.
Yep.
Team him up with Baby Yoda.
Oh, boy. Yep, that's a buddy cop movie waiting to happen.
Yeah. So yes, as just a movie at face value, it's cute. It's a fun adventure. A little weird, but very classic in its feel.
Sure, fair enough. I think this movie is a bit of a mess. Not gonna
yeah?
lie. I don't know if that's what you thought I was going to think. I don't actually know. I'm quite curious now. What did you think I was going to think of the movie?
Well, probably a similar thought to what I had, but a bit more exaggerated in the fact that it feels like it's two movies stuck together in one with about all these other subplots that they tried to wrap up very quickly after introducing them halfway through the movie.
Yeah, yep, that's pretty much it.
Yes, which I do agree with.
Yeah, so I had a really interesting experience with this in that I saw this film twice on its opening day. I saw it in the morning in IMAX, and I came out and I said, yeah, I didn't mind that. I had a good time. It was a fun adventure. It has a lot of problems, but I had an enjoyable experience. Then I went and saw it in the afternoon with a couple of other people, and a lot of its flaws were just really, really apparent to me. I think a lot of my problems really comes down to the fact that this script was co-written J.J. Abrams and, is his name Chris Purnell, I think? And his previous two writing credits are on Batman v Superman and Justice League.
Uh-huh.
And quite frankly, I think a lot of the problems with the writing in those movies kind of carry over to this. And then it's really messy. It has setups without payoffs without setups. Yeah. The whole first half of the film is essentially like a Russian doll MacGuffin fetch quest.
Oh, yeah.
Of like a fetch quest within a fetch quest within a fetch quest that just isn't particularly interesting or engaging on a narrative level, I think. And just doesn't do a very good job of not even concluding this trilogy in that it drops so many threads from the previous film, but also concluding the ultimate Skywalker saga as well. I don't think it's bad. I don't think I would quite go that far, and I think there's a lot of fun stuff in this. I think the Rey and Kylo stuff is a really strong through line through all three of these films. But this movie as a whole, I just thought kind of came together pretty clunkily.
Yeah, I reckon...
Pretty mucklunky. I've been waiting to use that pun for so long. Oh, it's perfect. It's so perfect.
So back on track.
Yep.
I do see where you're coming from. I think the reason I thought it was cute and adventurous was because I was sort of glossing over a lot of the flaws to focus on the main sort of what I thought was the main storyline, which was the Kylo Ren Rey kind of through line of the story, which I thought was actually quite well done up until the very last moment of it.
Sure.
And I thought those scenes were absolutely stunning and brilliant in all three of their saber fights that they sort of go through, and it works on the character development more than any of the other previous two. Like, I actually felt something for both Ben and Rey, and felt that over the course of the movie they actually did change.
What a radical notion.
Yeah. Which even some then sort of like almost retroactively kind of not necessarily fully fixed, but just sort of tweaked their previous two movies and their character development in that.
Streamlined it a little bit,
Yes.
retroactively.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
Which was very thankful, because if you left those two, The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi by themselves, I don't think it would have been as solid as a development. So it was good that it was there.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right, and that dynamic is like the strongest through line through all three of these movies. We should probably talk as well, considering this is the first time we've talked about Star Wars on this podcast, which is kind of surprising, honestly, but it definitely won't be the last, I'm sure. But obviously, the opinions on the previous movies, especially The Last Jedi, is going to impact how you perceive this movie.
Yes.
A lot of people think this whole trilogy, and this movie in particular, is kind of basically a dueling between two very, very different storytellers in J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson. And I feel like this movie tries at least to continue some of the threads of The Last Jedi, but I don't think it does a very good job, and I think it glosses over a lot of them as well. Like, Rose is given very little screen time.
Yep.
The whole democratization of the Force that whole film talks about and ends with is completely glossed over to the point, oh, it's just lineages again. Like, we're back to just running around, yelling about who's a Vader and who's an Emperor and who's a Skywalker and everything like that. Whereas The Last Jedi was so very much against that, which ultimately I think in some respects gives a little bit of a lack of cohesion to the trilogy as a whole. And I think this movie, out of all three of those movies, kind of suffers from that lack of cohesion in some respects. So outside of the Rey and Kylo stuff, at least, yeah.
I certainly felt like that, especially because it did feel like J.J. Abrams was just going, okay, let's sort of ignore The Last Jedi. I'm just going to stuff my version of Episode 8 onto the start of this movie and hope for the best.
Once again, two movies in one.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's very true.
Which, definitely does suffer for, and I'm not going to get into the whole controversy and all the hate and stuff that was happening through The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
But it should have, I reckon they should have had some sort of cohesion between Rian and J.J. Abrams, some sort of connecting branch.
Of course.
Rather than just what kind of seemed like a dick measuring contest
And also just
for JJ.
Both of them were flying by the seat of their pants. Like it's very, very clear if you look at the trilogy as a whole that there was no overarching vision or plot structure or anything like that. The idea of the Emperor coming back, which is a major plot point in this film, was only floated just as, The Last Jedi was coming out, basically. So I think all three films, in essence, suffer from the fact that there was no overall direction and no roadmap, essentially.
Yeah.
And I think this one especially does, considering it is supposed to be the conclusion, not only of this trilogy, but like the Skywalker saga as a whole, which is an impossible task as is.
Yes.
But is made even more difficult because of the previous films and because of the creativity or the lack of creativity and organization behind it, frankly. So, yeah.
That being said, though, it does what basically all the Star Wars films get right every time, even the prequels, in that it just looks pretty.
It's very, very pretty. Yeah, it looks real good, and it is very, very J.J. Abrams in that it's fast and flashy and kinetic and always exciting and everything like that. Sometimes to its detriment, I think, not gonna lie. I think the pace and sometimes how much is going on is a little bit of a mess. But I mean, at the end of the day, like, Star Wars was always meant to be just kind of a schlocky space serial adventure, essentially. It's just that it has been mythologized and picked apart to the nth degree. But at the end of the day, they're just supposed to be dumb, kind of fun space adventures.
Yeah.
And
for kids.
Yeah, exactly. Like, George Lucas, despite all of the adult fans, obviously, us among them, has been very explicit in this franchise is supposed to be for kids and just for fun entertainment. And at the end of the day, this movie is still that. It's just because there is so much more expectations around it, because it is not just a fun space serial, it is Star Wars, it is the Star Wars, it is the franchise. And because of that, it can't get away from its legacy in any of the films, but this film especially.
And it also doesn't seem like it's trying to get away from its legacy either. It is very much just like, hey, look at all this stuff. We're going to put in lore for every single little thing. We're going to stuff as many characters as we can in there to try and continue building this world and make merchandise.
Yep, pretty much it. Like that whole thing with Lando and the woman at the end, the ex-stormtrooper. Apparently that was supposed to be a subplot where it turned out she was Lando's granddaughter or something like that.
Oh.
But that was kind of cut, and then they just kind of allude to it in the movie. There's that whole thing with Chewbacca getting a medal as well, which is just a dumb joke on the internet for the last 50 years. Like, and yeah, just a lot of real, like, overstuffing, I think is probably the best way to describe it. And just a lot of those, like, member berries kind of, you remember this, you remember that? Like, J.J. Abrams was clearly reverential of those original trilogies to a fault. And it's the same thing in The Force Awakens, that it is very much harping on that original iconography.
That seems to be a trend this week, given we've just released Superman Returns, and how that was harkening back to its own detriment previous kids' films.
Yeah, it's absolutely correct. It's very interesting in that, especially long...
You heard it here first. The Rise of Skywalker is the Superman Returns of the Star Wars franchise.
I mean, but you joke about that, but that comparison in some respects actually kind of works. Considering especially franchises with really long legacies trying to return back to that in some respects and harping back to that previous age. Both of those movies are trying to do very similar things. And both of them, well, I think The Rise of Skywalker is more successful than Superman Returns.
Yeah.
Listen to our episode for that and further analysis. I do think it struggles in some ways under the weight of that legacy and without forging its own identity in some ways. And I think... What was I about to say? Something. Oh, that's right. And the other thing, like, obviously the narrative around this movie is still being written, but there's a lot of talk that this will easily be the lowest grossing of the three. Like, this almost might be seen as a financial disappointment of the three of them. A lot of that, people might put that on The Last Jedi and people just being less interested in the trilogy, which is possible. But I do think that there is, because of the fact that it is so harpening back to something previously, like, it is not... it is not as engaging for new audiences who don't have those same nostalgia connectors to the original trilogy. So,
also, there's sort of the extra thing. Obviously, you probably don't feel the same way, but I've only seen this once, and I don't feel the need to see it again. Honestly, I don't see any real point to replay value. There's no like enhancement of the original that I'm going to find. If anything, it's just going to be the same or a detriment. And so I think that's going to harm it financially, because I'm like, yep. I'm done now. This is fine. I've seen it. I'm happy. I'll leave it.
That's pretty much it. Yeah, I felt, even after I came out of the first screening, I'm like, I don't even feel like I need to see it again. Like, and I did, and it didn't help. If anything, I liked it not considerably less, but I definitely liked it less on a second viewing. And I may never see it again. Who knows? Yeah. I saw The Last Jedi only once in cinemas, and then I saw it again leading up to this movie, but that's it. Same with The Force Awakens. Yeah. So, like, I've never been that invested in... rewatching those movies in that way. Though it is, we should also preface as well, like, obviously considering our generation and such as well, we have a different connection to Star Wars because of the nostalgia connections than a lot of people do to those original films.
We grew up with the prequels rather than the originals.
Yeah, exactly, which is a very, very different mindset. But I think that greater level of apathy is, if anything, kind of showing with this last movie, which I think is kind of interesting. Cool. Yeah. I feel like there's so many other details we could get into at the very least, but... This seems like a decent enough summary of our thoughts. Yeah.
If you want to hear from more of us, email us. We can potentially do a Star Wars special later on if that is something you really want to hear from us.
Yeah, for sure.
Let us know.
And we'll definitely be doing Star Wars episodes down the line or something like that. I just finished Fallen Order. I would very much like to do an episode on that. That'll be real good fun. There's Clone Wars.
Dark Souls in Space.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, it's real good. It's real good.
I mentioned The Mandalorian before. That'd be...
Of course.
Interesting
divergence. That'd be an appropriate one to do as
and
well.
Of course, the one that every movie podcast that talks about Star Wars must get into at some point. The Holiday Special.
I've never actually seen it.
Neither have I. I've seen clips of it.
Oh, yeah. I've seen bits and pieces of it. Part of me never wants to, but another morbid, slightly drunker part of me is like, ooh, boy, I'm looking forward to that. So if you're looking forward to that, don't forget to subscribe. And continue to listen to episodes. There'll be more, podcast details down the line. Send in your thoughts about Rise of Skywalker, because everyone seems to have thoughts about everything about all of this movie, all the time, for the rest of time. It's literally the only thing I've seen anyone talk about for the last 2 weeks, so...
aside from one other particular movie that released at the same time.
Well, we're going to get into that one, hopefully in a later episode, so I'm very, very excited about that. Until next time, fare thee well.
Pew.